Life is tough, but there's hope. Join us as we tackle those issues that affect you, answer your questions, and help guide you to solutions that will help improve your life. Today's topic is on failure. Failure. We all experience failure. We all make bad decisions, choices that we wish we didn't make that lead to losses, lead to consequences. If you're living on this planet, breathing oxygen, you made mistakes and you will make more mistakes. We all do. But how do we turn those mistakes into fuel for greater success and greater rewards in our lives? That's what we want to talk about. In fact, I want to talk about that in 4 parts. But today we're going to focus on one thing that I want us to consider about failure. And I want to do that by using a story that's in the New Testament, in the Bible. It's a story, a parable that Jesus told. I like it because it really illustrates this thing called failure and how we cope successfully with failure. Right? And the story, really briefly, it's about a young man who lived with his wealthy father. And he wanted to get out on his own and start his own life. So he asked his father, he said, "Father, I want my inheritance early." And so his father gave him the value of the money that if he had died that day, he gave him the inheritance or the value of that inheritance. And that young man went to a far city, a metropolis far away from home, and wasted all of the money. I mean, just spent it up in bars and clubs and parties and brothels and all of that stuff, completely wasted all the money. Talk about failure. Talk about bad choices. How do you deal with failure like that? How do you cope? And better yet, how do you turn that kind of failure into a success, into a win, into rewards? How do we turn that kind of failure into fuel? That's what we're going to talk about today. Again, I want to just focus on that one thing, and here it is. Don't blow things out of proportion. Don't blow things out of proportion. Yeah, you made a mistake. Yeah, it's a bad one. Yeah, it could be big. But don't magnify your failure to the point that it's more disastrous than it really is in your mind. Why not? Why do we not want to do that? What happens when we think catastrophically about our failures? Two things. Number one, when we think catastrophically about our failures, it crushes our hope. It literally strangles our hope. And when our hope is strangled, we really don't believe we can recover. And when we don't believe, we don't try, right? You had a bad first semester in college, you failed a couple of classes, and then you make that some bombastic statement in your mind about you. Well, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just not college material. Maybe I just don't have the brain to really do an advanced degree, and you drop out. Right? Because of that catastrophic thinking, it constricts your hope and you just don't try, right? We don't want to do that. But here's the second thing. When you're thinking along those lines, in crisis mode, you panic, right? You're functioning in crisis mode. And when you're panicking, you don't think clearly. You tend to have rash thinking and impulsive thinking, making impulsive decisions, right? Which compounds your situation and makes it worse, right? You did something, you made a mistake that led to a breakup with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and you feel horrible. You feel like your world is ending. You've got to get in a relationship right now. And so instead of taking time to think about and process what has happened and to evaluate even your steps and what you really need in a relationship, you go and find the first person who shows interest and jump right back into a relationship, which is the last thing you need to do, right? Complicating your situation. Why? Because of that catastrophic thinking, that apocalyptic thinking. This is the end. This is it, right? And so we often go right into that kind of thinking about our failures without stopping and thinking realistically about what we've done or what our situation is, right? So that's number one. Stop thinking catastrophically about your failure, your mistake, or your choice. Going back to that story I was telling earlier, that parable in the New Testament, the young man, when he made his terrible decision and experienced that failure, how did he handle that? How did he deal with that? Well, the catastrophic thinking. The Bible says he went and hired himself out to a farmer and basically got himself trapped into a slave labor type of situation where he was feeding the farmer's pigs and could not even, getting no wages, getting no food, just a little shelter over his head, maybe lived in a shed, and could not even eat the pods that he was feeding the pigs. So he went and made a very rash decision and trapped himself in a situation, making his situation worse. Why? Because he was thinking catastrophically about his failure. He did not pause and say, wait a minute, what are the next steps that I need to take? I've made a mistake here. How do I begin to climb toward recovery? So let me just ask somebody right now who maybe have just experienced a fresh failure. You've made a bad choice. You're starting to look at the consequences of this thing, and you're really, the alarms are going off, and you're like, oh boy, I've messed up for life. It's over. I'm done. Just stop for a minute. And let me just ask you something. Are you breathing? Are you able to hear and see this video? Are you able to touch the keys on your device? That means you're alive. And every minute you're alive is another opportunity. Every moment that you're breathing represents another possibility. When you open your eyes and put your feet on the floor, that's another possibility in front of you. When you open your front door and step outside, that is another opportunity to better yourself, to make better choices, to advance in your life, to add value to your life and to the lives of others. Every moment that you're awake is another opportunity. And so I want you to think about that. It's not over. It's not over. So if you made that mistake and you're thinking, oh boy, this is it. I'm never going to experience joy again. I'm never going to have an opportunity again. I'm messed up for life. Stop that kind of thinking. In that story, in verse 17, Luke 15, verse 17, the Bible says something very profound, and I want you to remember this. It says that the young man came to his senses and said, how many hired servants in my father's house have plenty of food to eat, and I'm here starving to death? He began to think about other options because he came to his senses. In other words, he stopped the catastrophic thinking. He stopped blowing his failure out of proportion, and he began to think realistically about his situation. You know what? It's a failure, not a funeral. It's a loss of money, not a loss of life. It's disturbing, but it's not death. It's the end of something, but it's not the end. As long as I'm still here, I can make better choices. I can climb to recovery. I can go on to more rewarding things in my life. I want us to remember that and think about that. Now, we're going to come back to you with another thought on turning your failures into fuel for greater success. I want you to, again, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that bell so that you'll be notified when the next video is coming out, so we can continue this topic on failure and turning our failure into fuel. You can also, again, go to our website, hopeforyourlife.com, and receive updates. Submit your questions, submit your topics. We want to hear from you so that we can share content that is relevant to you and your issues. Until next time.